That was a great song, wasn't it? It's kind of the song that puts out there what I think we want a new year to be around. A year of overcoming, a year of breaking free, a year of starting fresh, and maybe this year will be the year that fill in the blank. And the reality is, it can be. And the reality is, it will be. At least for some of us, it will be. But it's all about how we look at it. It's all about having a new hope. Because if it isn't new, it's an old, and if it's old, it isn't new, and if for some of us, we are tired of the old hope that we've had. Because the old hope hasn't gotten us to where we need to be, where we want to be, where we'd like to be. So let me get it out of the way as we start this morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I say that because hopefully it has been a Happy New Year. But I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe you can help me. When is it time to not say Happy New Year any longer? Is it the end of January? Is it end of February? It was when your resolution is no longer a resolution? I mean, when is it? You know, for some of us, you know, Happy New Year was, Wednesday. Hey, Happy New Year. Maybe late, early Wednesday morning was Happy New Year. Then later in the day, or maybe, last couple of days with the weather, your car gets stuck, your battery doesn't work, and the pipes break, and whatever. And no longer is it Happy New Year. It's Happy New Year, right? And off we go. But we're going to kick off this year by talking a lot about hope. Because it's not only what our name of our church is, it's literally the thing all of us hold on to. It's literally the thing like that H up there we hold on to keep us from falling down. And we might roll around, we might blow in the wind, but we want to have hope that holds us. We're going to kick off a series next week. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But today I just simply want to talk about this idea of new hope and a new way of looking at hope. Because I imagine most of us have this idea that we get to the start of a new year and it's a fresh start. And there's a chance to make some changes in our lives. And sometimes we have a whole list of changes we're going to make for the new year. I'm going to do just a little quick poll here. How many of you have made at least one New Year's resolution this year? All right, a pretty good group. How many have made more than one? I have bad news for you. People that study this kind of stuff say you need to make only one change at a time. If you try to make more changes, you probably won't make any changes. So just a little word of advice to you, stick with the first answer, not the second answer, all right? But we make those resolutions because we think this, we're going to do something. And some of us, it's the idea I'm going to lose a little bit of weight because I started eating at Thanksgiving. And I kept eating through Christmas, followed by New Year's, and who doesn't want to have a party at New Year's? And here I am, and I kept waiting for January 1st to get here because there's that deadline, that arbitrary deadline that says, this is when I'm going to start. Anybody else there with me on that? So often, I'm going to get my life together, but that looks good right now, I'm going to do it tomorrow. But January 1st gives us a date, a specific thing that not only us, but so many other people rally around to say, this is the time we're going to really get in and sink in and do something. And a lot of us, this idea here that was up on the board there, that you can suffer the pain of change or suffer remaining the way you are. And the reality is we're going to suffer either way, right? But that idea is what motivates a lot of us to make some kind of resolution as we begin a new year. Because we recognize we have suffered long enough the way we are, so we're going to suffer some pain of change because we want to make some progress. We want to have that hope turn into reality. So that the thing we need to make a difference in our life will no longer just be a hope, but will be a reality for us. But here's what I want us to think about today. So often when we think about doing some resolution, it's about trying harder, right? This year I'm going to try harder, right? Eric, I'm going to really get in and, work out harder. I'm going to really try harder because if I just try harder, things will work out. But what if instead of trying harder, you tried it differently this year? See, today we're going to celebrate what we call communion or the Lord's Supper. A reminder again that it really doesn't have anything to do with us. That the reason we're here this morning isn't because we got up and braved this terrible cold and the scary roads and all that kind of stuff we throw out there. You know, sometimes we get up and say, oh, thank you for coming out, making that big sacrifice. We didn't make a sacrifice to come to church this morning, did we? Jesus made a sacrifice. We were just a little inconvenienced. Had to drive a little bit slower, right? Here's the thing I want us to think about. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And so many of us, as we think about a New Year's resolution, we think about, oh, I remember how this worked before, and I'm just going to go back and redo that again. Try harder. If I just try harder this time, it's going to work. But if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always gotten. And so we need to do something that we haven't done before so that we'll get what we always wish we could get but never gotten. Make sense? Everybody say yes. Make me feel better this morning. Thank you. All right. See, communion is a reminder that hope is not focused on us. It is not about us getting our lives together. It is not about us losing that 10 pounds that really is about 30 pounds, but we want to call it 10 because we're going to feel better about that, right? It isn't about us saying, you know, we're going to pray harder this year. We're going to study our Bible more this year. We're going to talk to our neighbors. We're going to try to be nicer. We're going to try. And communion will remind us that it's not so much about trying harder. It's about trying something different. Let me see if I can make a little sense out of this. Over in John chapter 13, John, one of Jesus' followers, captures sort of what happens on this evening when Passover, this huge, wonderful Jewish tradition that had gone on for thousands of years, this reminder that God had brought his people out of Egypt. This thing that every year they celebrated, not just for what happened for their ancestors, but what happened to them. John captures here this whole night of how Jesus transforms that event that looked back to an event that was going to be present for them that today we would look back on. And John begins to say that Jesus knew. He knew that the Father had given him authority over everything. And Jesus also knew that he'd come from God and that he would return to God. And there's something about knowing that gets us through a lot of things, isn't it? When we know we have the authority to do this, when we know that, you know, what's been going on, we know that we've assured where we were from and where we're going, when we have that assurance, there's something that takes place different in our lives. And John says Jesus knew. He knew what was going on that night. And so because he knew, he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. And then he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was around him. And Jesus does that because Jesus knew. He knew who he was. He knew what kind of authority he had. And he knew that that authority was not to leave him up here as in charge of everything, but was to drive him to wash people's feet. If you remember the story, Jesus begins to wash the disciples' feet, and I don't know how many he gets done, but he gets to Peter. And Peter is that life of the party drama queen that everybody loves to have around for a little bit of time, but then wants to go away after a little bit of time, right? And so Jesus gets, he's washing feet. He's washing, James' feet. Maybe he washes John's feet. He gets to Peter, and Peter makes this big scene. He jumps up and says, oh, no, Jesus, you're not washing my feet. Look at me, guys. I'm the only one smart enough to say that our Messiah is not going to wash my feet. And Jesus simply says to him, Peter, come on. You need to let me wash your feet, because if you don't, you're not going to be part of what's going on. To which Peter goes the opposite way. He begins to wrestle with Jesus with a basin of water. Throw the water on me. Just throw it all over me. And Jesus is like, Peter, calm down. I'm not going to throw water all over you. I simply need to, if you've already had a bath, if you've already been baptized, you simply need to have your feet washed. That there is something within all of us that needs that periodic cleansing, that periodic re-immersion, re-energizing, including into our lives of some hope. That we've been baptized, that we've started fresh with God, and then life has happened, and our feet have gotten muddy, and our lives have gotten dirty, and now what do? Do we have to go back in the tank and take a hold of the bath? And Jesus says, no, 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 no. I understand how life works. And you're still part of me. You simply need to have periodic cleansing from these things. And the interesting thing is, in John's account, Peter doesn't say another word after that. That there's something that takes place from his big, you're not washing my feet, to, I'll throw water all over me, to when Jesus says, listen, Peter, you don't really understand, but you're going to understand later. That sticks with Peter. And isn't it true in our lives? That so often we don't always understand, even though we think we do at the moment, what's going on. You know, we have one reaction, or maybe we have a opposite reaction, and even in all that, we really don't understand until later that we have a chance to stop and to think about what's going on. In fact, Jesus will say to the whole group, do you understand what I was doing? And I love the fact, again, that Peter doesn't say anything, because you would have thought Peter would say, oh yeah, I understand. It's clear to me now, Jesus. Nothing. And then Jesus goes on and says, listen, since I, the Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you example to follow. Do as I have done to you. Now here's the problem with what Jesus said. So often people have read that and said, now I have to do that. I have to wash somebody else's feet. Why? Because Jesus washed somebody's feet. In fact, we have feet washing today. Anytime during the day you want to go up and do that, we think it's an important practice. But you don't have to do it. And I want you to know you don't have to do it. Because when Jesus says, I've given you an example to follow, do as I have done, he's not saying you have to do this. He's inviting us into his experience. He's inviting us to experience what it's like to not sort of have somebody else serve us, but to serve somebody else. He's inviting us to put ourselves in the place of serving instead of receiving. You've probably heard this statement before. Attitude is everything, right? And it's true. Attitude makes a huge difference. I'm guessing some of you sitting here today went to some parties over this whole holiday season. And there were probably at least one or two of those parties you thought, I'm going to have a lousy time at. And you know what? You probably had a lousy time at it. But there were probably some of you were looking forward to and thought, hey, this is going to be all right. Or maybe somebody said, no, I think it's going to be fun. And you kind of gave a little room, and it actually turned out that way. And let me take a little sidetrack here for you ladies out there to give you a little insight into us guys. If you're ever going any place with us guys, and we ask you, how long is it going to be? You need to tell us how long it's going to be. Because we function better in parameters. If you say, we're going to go to so-and-so's house, okay, how long are we going? We're going to be there for 2 hours. Okay, set my clock. I'm fine, right? We're fine. I can function great in 2 hours. But we get to the end of 2 hours, we need to be going, baby, right? Because we know how long we have to be on, how long we, engage. But if you say, I don't know, we're just going to be there for a while, oh, no. I mean, you know how we get. And it's hard for us to engage and to be happy and stuff when we don't know the parameters of what we're doing. I mean, you've gone to the mall probably over this Christmas season and seen the guys shopping with their wives. They have those wonderful little chairs that us guys sit in with all the bags. Because we don't have any parameters. For us, we say we're going shopping. For the vast majority of guys, we're going shopping. We know. We go in, we get our stuff, and we leave, right? We are not hunter-gatherers. To gather a little here, a little there. Oh, I just want to look at this. I'm going to try this on. Oh, isn't that lovely? You going to buy that? No, I'm just looking. But you give us parameters. You say, hey, we're going to go shopping for an hour. That's what it is. Well, we can engage for an hour. But you don't give us parameters. It's tough. And it really comes back to attitude. And it's hard for us guys to have a good attitude and have attitude is everything if we don't know what we need to have attitude about. That's a little side note, extra special, starting off the new year. Nothing to do with what I'm talking about, all right? But the reality is attitude is everything. And what I want you to see is that what Jesus is inviting us to do differently this year is to switch from a have to a get to attitude. Because so often it is easy to fall into the have to. Jesus said I'm supposed to wash somebody's feet. I guess I have to. Or Jesus says I'm supposed to wash somebody's feet. Oh, I get to. I get to participate in this idea of bringing cleansing into somebody's life. To wash the dirt off their feet, the dirt that's packed onto their life, to give them a fresh start, and they'll do the same for me, that we're in this together. Think of how many things in your life could change for the better if you switched from being a have-to kind of person to a get-to kind of person. John 8, verse 36, it's from the Voice. It's a fairly new translation, kind of modernizes things. This is Jesus talking. He says, think of it this way. If the Son comes to make you free, you will really be free. And what if that freedom is about our attitudes? What if that freedom is about how we look at things, how we experience things? Not just being free from our debt and free from, this extra 10 pounds, or free from this hassle, or free from that job, or what if the freedom has nothing to do with those things and everything to do with this thing? Let's walk through this have to get to thing. Jesus washes their feet that night. Did he have to, or did he get to? Jesus dies as our substitute. Did he have to, or did he get to? Jesus directs us to love one another, serve one another, care for one another. Is that a have to or a get to opportunity? I mean, think about it for a second, folks. We are so blessed with opportunities. You're blessed with life. Everybody hold your hand out in front of you like this for a second. Don't hit anybody in the back of the head. Keep it back a little bit, Brian. Okay. But I want you to look at your hand for just 1 second. And I want you to move this finger here. What is that, the first finger? Just hear me. Index, thank you. Okay, yeah. Move your index finger. And then move your pinky finger. And move all your fingers. No thumbs, just finger. Isn't that incredible? You did all that just by saying, move my thumb. And it moves. Now, did it have to move? It got to move, that's right. And what about in your life? What if this year you looked at things no longer as have-tos, but I get to? I don't have to go to work on Monday morning, go down and catch the subway, get down there, have to, trump a couple blocks to office, go up the elevator, it'll probably be broke, I have to take the stair. What if I get to? What if that's a blessing from God for me to have a job? What if I get to ride the subway and see all these other people who need some smiles in their lives? What if I get to walk a couple of blocks in the fresh air? Fresh air can't be necessarily bad for me. What if I get to take the stairs? Maybe that will help with this whole 10 pounds that I need to lose. Do you see the difference that can take place? And what I hope that you'll understand is that is exactly what Jesus has come to bring freedom for. Freedom, for most of us, we recognize our greatest enemy is not our neighbor who has that lousy dog that not only barks all night long but poops all over our yard. Our enemy isn't that person in the next cubicle that always has, those terrible sounds, coming out of their radio, or listens to those kind of, talk shows, or cooks that kind of stuff that just stinks. We all know that our greatest enemy happens to be sitting exactly where you're sitting this morning. Isn't that true? And if that is true, the hope that you need and the hope that I need is that this person can be different this year, not just that other person can be different. And a lot of that difference begins with that. A lot of that difference begins with a hope that I can be changed from somebody who has to do a lot of things to somebody that becomes much more appreciative and that gets to do a lot of things. And we have that privilege based on what Jesus has done for us. See, when Jesus says that if the Son makes you free, think of it this way, you'll really be free. It is based on what Jesus knows is going to take place. That we are freed. I talked about this a few months ago. Sin is no longer our master. Remember that? Sin is no longer our master. That is the freedom. And sin isn't just the stuff that comes from out there, it's the stuff that wells around in here. And in just a couple of moments, I'm going to invite you to get up out of your chair and come forward, and we're going to ask you to come up and grab the bread and the juice that represents Jesus' body. And we're going to do that today because it's a tangible reminder again of the new hope God wants to bring into your life. It's a tangible reminder again that I'm going to ingest, I'm going to allow God to come into my life and not only bring me freedom from sin, but even freedom from the attitude. Freedom from the stuff that makes me look at life as a have to instead of a get to. You hold in your hands something that is sacred. And it's sacred not because we've said some kind of prayer over it, not because it's a special recipe that's been hidden away for thousands of years. You hold something in your hand that's sacred because of what it represents. Jesus' body. His flesh and his blood. And for thousands of years, Christians, people just like us, have taken this act to remind themselves again that Jesus died for them. That Jesus died for them. That Jesus died for them. And for thousands of years, they've considered the impact of what it means to ingest and to invite Jesus back into our lives. And in a moment, I want us to read together out loud from the 51st Psalm. And anytime as we read through this, if you feel moved, I invite you to eat the bread and drink the juice whenever you feel like it. But I want you to remember, this psalm is not a psalm of sadness or of mourning. It's not even a song of self-condemnation. But it is a psalm that is designed to remind us again of what God brings to us through his gift. What we get to experience today, not just what we have to experience today. A time of self-contemplation, of this cry of David in this case, after he really blew it. Blew it in a very public way, so that everybody knew about it. And his cry to a God that he knew so well, who he knew was always there to restore, was always there to forgive, was always there to work him back to a place where that walk was the most important thing in his life. So that in mind, I invite you just to read this along with me. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion. Blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. You are proved right when you speak and justified when you judge. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. That was David's hope. And that was God's promise. True back then and true today. So with that thought, that David calls out to God to fix him, to right his way, to give him a new hope, based not on what David could do or would do, but based simply on God's graciousness, his loving kindness, his overwhelming mercy to those that he calls his children. Father, we thank you for sending your son Jesus. But not only would he live, not only would he die, not only would he come back to life again, but that he would do all those things for us as a way to restore that relationship, as a way to fix and repair our broken lives, as a way to heal us in such a way that literally changes us, that moves us from people who have to do this and have to do that in order to honor you, to people who get to do this, who get to do that in order to honor you and to say thanks. Father, as I've eaten this bread today and drinking this juice, I again invite you into my life. That as this new year begins, I can know I'm beginning it with you. Fresh, clean, with all the hopes and possibilities that you want me to have for a brand new start in you. And I'm thankful that again because of Jesus. And it's in his name and for his sake I pray. Amen. This is a statement I shared with you this last fall, but I think it's a great statement to start the year with. That is that at any given moment, you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end. It's one of the great things about a new year. A chance to change your story. And here's the question. The question of the day is simply this. Is this that moment? Because it can be. And all it requires is for you to say, yes. Make it happen. In your programs when you came in today, you saw you had a couple of cards. And it's a new series we're going to kick off next week, this idea of finding hope in kind of a scary, dark world. But finding more than hope, finding ways to experience that hope. And so we've given you a couple of them in there, one for you and one to share with somebody else. Because you know somebody who's part of your life that really needs some hope, who needs to experience what a brand new year is all about. And there's a passage over in Isaiah 43 that it captures what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks. And it's simply this. This is God speaking to his children. He says, listen, forget what happened in the past. Is that good news? God says, forget it. Forget what happened in your past and do not dwell on the events of long ago. And the reality is, so many of us, our past is not our past is our present because we haven't allowed it to be our past because we haven't forgotten it. We haven't stopped dwelling on those things from years ago. We're going to talk about ways to do that over the next few weeks. And then God says this, I'm going to do something new. And I love this. It is already happening. Don't you recognize it? it's not God saying, I'm going to do something new and it's going to happen here in, 36 hours or a couple of weeks or maybe next year. He said, I'm going to do something new, but it's already happening. It's already happening. I will clear away in the desert. I will make rivers on the dry land. It's a reminder again that God can. That he can. And that can was true back then, and that can is true even today for you and for me. And so I just invite you to open your hearts for what God wants to do these next few weeks. The ways that he wants to clear away in whatever the desert that happens to be in your life, or to make rivers on a life that maybe has gotten dry. And to consider the possibilities of a new hope and of looking at new hope in a different way.